other people. All right, we're going to start with Teresa Briggs on the League's redistricting plan. So Teresa, if you want to fill us in on the latest.
Well, I'll sure try. So it's hard to believe that we're starting our third year. 2019 was when LWV first created and trademarked people-powered fair maps, brought in people from all 50 states for training and to let us know their concept and the strategies that they suggested for each state. So then last year, of course, we all know that was a horrible time to try to work on anything person to person. But many of the leagues did do a lot of work on get out the vote and encouraging people to complete the census and help them understand the connection between the results of the census with the process that's going to be starting now with redistricting. So here we are in 2021, our third year. The census data is going to be released over the next few months. Legislative redistricting committees have been formed. Meetings will be scheduled across the state. So as the saying goes, stuff is getting real. So I am so proud to be a member of this working group, and I think the state of Kansas should be proud. They're small but mighty. They've come up with several talking points, key elements of what we feel a fair redistricting process would entail. Primarily a lot focused around access and being sensitive to the issues of language and physical disability and various things like that, as well as ending the incumbent home seat information in the database and things like that. Mary Galligan, which many of you may know with the Topeka Shawnee County League, is able to share information with us from both the Governor's Redistricting Stakeholders Group and the Redistricting Advisory Group, which I guess they refer to as RAG. Seems appropriate. The couple of the leagues are really ahead of the game as far as how they have been addressing redistricting for quite some time. Have distinct web pages for redistricting on their websites and things like that. And we really are going to benefit from an intern that the Johnson County League has gotten, who is going to help us with a map drawing contest. We've explored 3 different formats of map drawing tools: Dave's redistricting, representable districtor, which is the word district with a small r at the end. And I think the majority of our group members have been really comfortable in most instances with districtor, although they do find assets or good points in some of the others for particular situations. We do want to make sure that all leagues are represented both in the work group and kept up to date on the messaging and the plans that we have so that we can have a consistent message across the state. Our biggest challenge is bringing what we have within our work group and then expanding out to the local leagues across the state. Working with our partners, engaging community members to try their hand at drawing maps of their community, interacting with their legislators, whether or not those legislators are on a committee. We have tried to stress that although they've identified the committee members, every legislator will be weighing in on the process at the session in 2022. And asking them to support our elements of fair maps. We're going to be creating a letter that will be a template for local leagues to send to their legislative delegations regarding the hearings and our suggested guidelines. And then also we're going to be providing help on identifying their communities of interest. And we want them to be willing to attend as many and able to attend as many hearings as possible. I'm sure everyone here is familiar with communities of interest, but it is actually in the Kansas legislative guidelines that there should be recognition of similarities of interest, social, cultural, racial, ethnic, and economic interests common to the population of the area. And it says, while some communities of interest lend themselves more readily than others to being embodied in legislative districts, the committee will attempt to accommodate interests articulated by residents. So that's really a marching orders for our community members to interact with them. We are very fortunate to have some strong partners across the state doing the same work. I'm sure some of you are members of those groups or know of them. I don't want to leave anyone out, so we'll just leave it at that. But we can never have too many partners. We can never have too many people engaged in doing this work. We do already have some resources that can be shared. LWVUS provided us a template of what they call, I love that bird sound. That is so pretty. Redistricting 101. It's a PowerPoint, and Mary Galligan took it, prepared it for a day of action and made it appropriate for Kansas. So that's available. We had 3 videos professionally produced. Each one is under 2 minutes, and they are on the LWVK YouTube channel, and they describe the People Powered Fair Map redistricting efforts, contested and non-contested races, and what that would mean to voters' choice. And then the final one was communities of interest. So those can be used anywhere. You can post them wherever you want or show them wherever you want to. The map drawing contest, we're real excited about getting to work on that, and we hope to be able to share those fairly quickly with school systems, high schools, colleges, to get more youth involvement, and hopefully from there it would also engage the communities. We started out meeting monthly. We do now meet weekly on Thursdays from 6 to 7 p.m. via Zoom. Anyone is welcome to attend. But the really
Did we lose Teresa? I think maybe she was about finished anyway. Time-wise, at least. No, Teresa often has difficulty with her internet.
Yeah, I do. Okay, I'm back and I'm just almost done. So if anyone's interested, I can add you to the email list and get you the link. We use the same link every week. What I started to say is this group is already looking ahead to 2030, because all the work that we're doing now should pay off. And if we continue on till the next round of census and redistricting, we'll be that much further ahead. Anybody have any questions? You bet. And thank you all for supporting us and for being on the committee.
Teresa, what committee are you talking about? I'm sorry I was late. Is this the redistricting?
Yes, the People Powered Fair Maps.
Yes, I'd like to sit in on that if I could. Just for
okay,
my
I'll add you to the list.
I mean, you know, because I'm very interested in that.
Yeah, be happy to have you.
One of our members, Charlotte, is sitting in on it, and she finds it a little overwhelming, but very interesting, and is trying to get a group of 3 or 4 people together so they can sort of work it through together.
Thank you, Linda.
We do appreciate her attendance, and it is confusing.
All right, thank you all.
Right.
Let's go on to the legislative redistricting meetings and process. Paul's going to talk us through that.
Okay, here we go. It was actually leadership from the House and Senate that really finally started this process going, and they were mostly from the Legislative Coordinating Council, which is the ruling body. But so they settled that we're going to have 9 days of hearings, this fall on redistricting at 14 different sites, which is the same as it was done in 2011. And they've now handed it off to the leadership folks have handed it off to the House and the Senate redistricting committees. And the House redistricting committee has 17 members. The Senate redistricting committee has 9 members. The chair of the House redistricting committee is a man named Chris Croft, retired Army. This is his second term in the state legislature. So, and the Democrats on the Senate side are Dinah Sykes, who will be the minority leader of that, and then Ethan Corson, who's a new state senator, former chair of the Democratic Party in Johnson County, is on the committee, and he may be really the point person for the Democrats, the Senate Democrats. And the, I screwed that up. Chris Croft is the House. He's head of that. Excuse me. The 2 key Democrats on the House committee are Tom Burrows, who's the ranking minority member from Kansas City, Kansas, has been through this a couple times. He's been in the legislature a long time. And now Vic Miller is also on the House side. I should have said on the Senate side, the chair is a man named Wilborn, who's the state senator from McPherson County. And the 2 Democrats on the Senate side are Dinah Sykes and Ethan Corson. So the committee chairs are going to get together, and then they're going to make the decisions about when these 9 days of hearings are going to be held. They put enough money into it so that all 26 members of these 2 committees, plus 4 members of leadership, will be able to travel to these hearings if they want to. What we're waiting on, obviously, is population data at a county level. And the census numbers are going to come in a very computer-based format in mid-August. You have to have special, really software to read it and understand it. It seems like it will be about late September that the data will become on more of a public availability site. There's questions on these hearings about, I think all of them are going to have internet connection, so you can listen in at least on an audio level, depending on the sites and how this is all set up. We'll see how much are Zoom available. The other thing I would say is that there's still some uncertainty about how these committees are going to be run at this point. I should have looked at the House side and what their committee rules are, but the Senate redistricting committee wasn't set up until the summer after the session was over. So I don't think they've adopted committee rules. And that gets into a game of how is public input going to be handled? Do you have to, 24-hour notice ahead of time to submit comments? Do they have to be written? Can they be oral and then you can add written comments? I mean, all of that is going to have to be settled out. And I'm not sure that we're going to see committee dates much before the end of August when they set this up. I don't know that for sure. The last thing I'll say is the staff for the Kansas Legislative Research Department that handles redistricting, that will answer questions. On the Senate side, it's Jordan Milholland, 296-3923, I believe. And he's new, he's an attorney, but this is new to him. On the House side, it's Joanna Dolan, who was with the 2011, went through this process in 2011, so she's the more experienced, but those will be the 2 that will be help coordinating these public hearings, and will explain details about committee rules and access by the public.
I have a couple of questions. Do you have a number for Joanna?
I'm sorry. 296-2381. Oh, I'm sorry. I would Google Kansas Legislative Research Department, and then
Okay.
you can go to the staff directory. Sorry, I don't have that.
No problem. I can do that. And then one other question I have is that I had noticed that the last time they did not appear to have a site in Shawnee County. Do they? And when I heard you say that they still have the 14 sites and they will be the same, does that mean that Shawnee County would not have any input?
Great question, and I don't have those sites remembered. All I know is that those sites are the same that was done in 2011.
Yeah, then that means
yeah, I could.
Yeah, the county's out.
The clerk. The other thing I would say is the clerk of the Senate today is a man named Corey Carnahan, and in 2011 he was on the Kansas Legislative Research Department staff on redistricting. So he's kind of the one that, besides Jordan and Joanna, has probably the best insight on how this process is going to unfold.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, shall we go on to the election lawsuits? Jackie?
Yeah.
Well, can you?
Yeah, I will do that in just a sec. I did want to mention that Kristen Salmons is on this call. And Kristen, I didn't tell you I was going to do this today, but Kristen had just told us before the meeting that she has agreed to be the coordinator for the Legislative Observer Corps for this next session. So she will be working closely with Seal. Seal will continue to be the advocacy chair. And then we're kind of separating this. So then Kristen will take care of the legislative observers. And so we're so excited. We may have to talk in the future about working on the time for this meeting, because she typically actually teaches a class during this time, but we can talk about that later. But for now, we're very excited and we welcome you, Kristen. And it's a good group of folks, and everybody, don't deluge her with a bunch of extra info. She's learning, but she will catch on, and we'll all work. We'll work together.
What league is she with?
I'm sorry. Oh, she's with the Lawrence League. I'm sorry, Sharon. She's with the Lawrence.
Thank you.
With the Lawrence League.
Yeah.
And
So,
thank you, Jackie. Yes,
You're
I'm
welcome.
excited to work with you all. And my learning curve will be steep, so please be patient with me. Seal and I have worked together quite a bit before, so and she teaches me things all the time. So I'm looking forward to jumping in, and it should be a fun.
I have a question, Jackie, is Paul still on?
Oh, yeah.
My question was, last time we redistricted, the legislature did not come up with a map, or they came up with a map that the courts determined was too partisan or not appropriate, and then the courts did it. I am wondering what he thinks the odds are that this is going to end up in the courts again this year, no matter what we do. Don't laugh, Paul.
Jackie, I would take a shot at that. Actually, the legislature in 2012 didn't come up with a map. They never could come up because the moderates and the conservatives were fighting. They ran out of time. They never got one even to the governor, and then eventually it had to be drawn up by 3 federal district court judges.
Okay, but if they do draw one up, it has to be considered adequate by the court before it goes into place. Is that correct?
It first of all, you got to get the governor is a player in this. So then the question is, how balanced are these maps going to be, and what would Governor Kelly veto at this point, and would that be overridden? And then it goes to as far as the state legislative districts and state board of education, that will be looked at by the Kansas Supreme Court at 15 days after they're adopted. The homework I haven't yet done is what guidelines is the Kansas Supreme Court looking at in terms of maps and their authority. How that plays against the 4 congressional districts in Kansas is also something this non-lawyer doesn't know about.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'll go ahead and just give a quick update on the lawsuit. I know some of you may have been on other calls that we've had, so you've heard some of these parts before. The current state of the lawsuit, so we originally filed July 1, I'm sorry, June 1, it's already almost August. June 1, we filed a lawsuit with our co-plaintiffs, Loud Light, the Topeka Independent Resource Council, and Kansas Appleseed. And we filed those regarding 4 different parts of HB 2183 and HB 2332. And as we looked at the provision in 2183 about impersonating an election official, it became kind of clear to us that it was very fuzzy and very unclear. And we were very concerned about how that might affect our activities over the summer and actually until we get an answer on the lawsuit. So on June 17th, our attorneys filed a brief asking for a temporary injunction of the part of 2183 that deals with impersonating an election official. And we asked for an expedited process for that to happen because the law went into effect July 1, and we really wanted to have that resolved by then. That did not happen. So as of July 1st, we asked our voter service volunteers across the state to temporarily cease in-person voter registration events where we might be confused as an election official. This was kind of something we didn't really want to do, obviously, but we felt we really did not have much choice because the law was so fuzzy and brought up so many questions. So we stopped that as of July 1st. Our attorneys and the other attorneys have all turned in all their papers. So all the paperwork has been at the judge's desk since July 6th. We are now waiting to hear from the judge. We're at a very fine line between not wanting to bother the judge and also wanting to make sure the judge understands that this is causing harm to our organization and to the work that we do. So we're kind of waiting again. We hope to get some answer soon. We just don't know when that is. So in the meantime, we are continuing for now to halt the in-person activities that involve voter registration. There's still lots of other activities our leagues are doing, and it's wonderful to see the creativity that has come because of this and the necessity to shift our focus just a bit. So that's where we're at right now. The attorneys know that we need to get a plan B. If we don't get an answer from the judge, what can we do? So they're looking at so they're trying to figure out what are some things that we can do? What's something maybe we can put on printed materials? What's a good thing that we could have, a sign that we could have on our booth at a farmer's market or a county fair that would still allow us to do some of this work that we really need to do before the November election. We've already missed out on most of the primary election season because that deadline was July 13th. So we are hopeful that we can get an answer in some way that will guide us forward. So that's where we are at right now.
Thank you, Jackie.
You're welcome.
Our league is interpreting this very narrowly, like voter education or handing out cards that list all the candidates. We were planning to do a bunch of forums, kind of focus groups with independent voters to find out what their reasons were for lower voting turnout and what we could do to help. And we've just put all of that on hold. And I haven't tried to talk them out of it because I wasn't sure. Is it just voter registration?
What we have told the local presidents and the voter service chairs, because we've had conversations with both groups together and separately, is if in your county, if it is an activity in person that your election office would do, you should not be doing that
Good.
right now.
Thank you.
And
Well-
so candidate forums can be fine. Certain handouts can be fine because you can still, you know, on a handout, it has our logo clearly on there. You could have a QR code still directing folks to register online using KS Votes or the Secretary of State's, whichever website, whichever you choose. But we want to steer away from giving out specific dates and information about registering, but yet we can guide people to sources on printed documents that clearly list our league's name, your league's name. So this is another instance where we've always urged you. I was a communications person before this, so always put your logo on everything. And I was always so surprised at how many things we would give out to folks that didn't have our logo. This is even more critical than ever. Always have your logo on those printed pieces. And if you are really in doubt and don't know, you can always ask Martha and me. But I will just let you know, if you just kind of follow that litmus test, if your election commissioner or county clerk's office would do that activity, those are the ones we're trying to steer clear from at this time.
I was just going to say that very same thing, Jackie. It's just really a matter of making sure that you identify what organization you're with. You know, I mean, that is what is going to determine, you know, the difference. You know, there's no ambiguity there. You know, so.
Well, but there is some ambiguity, because it's not just about whether we're clear in our communication. It's about how the observer is how we appear to the observer. So if somebody, even though we've been very clear at an in-person event that we're not an election official, they might be confused, and that's where the law is fuzzy. And unfortunately,
is how can someone be unclear about this is the League of Women Voters?
Because people don't pay attention to all the time.
You know, and then if you put that information on all the information that you're disseminating, you know, that's what I'm saying, is that's going to be important to have that logo on there, just as you mentioned. You know, it's going to be important to have that logo on that on any kind of information that you're disseminating.
But Glenda, what Jackie is saying is it does not protect a person in situ from a subjective analysis by another person and a reporting of that person. So if you're wanting to be in a place where you potentially could be hauled off to court for, infraction, some felonious, some just misdemeanor, depending on interpretation. And that is the whole point. So Jackie, good advice. And it's
yeah, I mean, I know that it is frustrating, because in our mind, we think, well, if I got this piece of material, it would not be a problem, you know, for me. I wouldn't assume anything, but that's you. You know, we all really pay attention to things we read. We really look at that. And the way the law is written, again, it makes it, just like Leslie said, it's subjective. It's based upon the viewer's perception, not on the person communicating and their intention.
Yeah, unfortunately, we're always going to be subjected to that. So, yeah.
So that's where we're at right now. So we hope to get an answer very soon, because we're ready to get back to that part of the work. But we're still doing the work. We're still doing other things for sure. The work is not stopped at all. It's just taken a slightly different focus.
One thing the election office does not do is candidate forums.
Right. I mentioned that as well. Yeah.
Yeah. We do need to go on to our agendas, so we aren't here forever. Thank you, though. That's a good discussion, and we're all frustrated by this, and very fun to ask what the impact on our booth at the state fair. And I think we're just going to hope that it's resolved by then. And yeah, Jackie just put in, yeah, we hope to have an answer by then. All right, let's go on to Paul's talk about budget and revenue and the tax picture.
For right now, this will be kind of short. Tax revenue has been up significantly. The budget picture at this point is we have an ending balance for the state general fund, the highest we've seen in 25 years. So, and normally what happens within the fiscal years in Kansas is that the state of Kansas borrows from idle funds. It's called the Pooled Money Investment Board funds.
Yes.
And they use that for cash flow purposes, to get everybody paid. And, when taxes come in at a certain time and, so they have to level out at 12 months of expenditures. But for this coming fiscal year that started July 1, we're, this will be the first year in I don't know how many years that we have enough in our ending balance that we're going to not have to do any internal borrowing for cash flow purposes. And the last thing I'll say is that obviously with all this extra money sloshing around, what are the best economic projections going forward? And are we in, uncharted waters in terms of, with all the extra federal money that came into Kansas and the stimulus money, et cetera, as that starts to dry up and unemployment benefits go away for virtually, the extra federal unemployment benefits go away the first part of September, how is this all going to play against the revenue picture? But you can count on the fact that come January, Republicans are going to want another set of tax cuts. And so then the question is, who gets the tax cuts this time? Last time it was, mega corporations bringing, money offshore, back to this country, et cetera, and it also went to, some of the wealthiest individual filers who wanted to deduct expenses at the state level, even though they didn't do it at the federal level. So, going forward, I think the tax question for the league will be, can we do something about the food sales tax, which is statewide, it's the second highest in the country, only behind Mississippi. But since we have local sales taxes like Johnson County and Shawnee and several, we may very well have the highest sales tax on food in the country. So will that happen? Another item is, for example, the homestead property tax relief that owners of property can get in Kansas. When the tax cuts went through under Brownback, all renters, which is a third of the occupants of housing in Kansas, were taken off. So that might be something to consider. And the third item would be Kansas credibly has a good state earned income tax credit that goes with the federal earned income tax credit. That hits working families, that hits families with children. Would that be a place to increase that in Kansas?
All right, were there any direct questions about the budget and revenue and taxes? And if not, we can go on to the interim topics. And we've got a spreadsheet up talking about all the different interim committees and the days that they've asked to hold meetings. So Paul, I think go ahead and start on that.
So it's a little difficult since I'm on the phone and I'm not looking at that chart. I was looking at it earlier today and I don't have a copy right in front of me, but it's broken into three sections. You have joint standing committees, and these committees meet during the legislative session as well as certain days over the interim time. So you have rules and regs, and you have CanCare, Bethel, on home care and Medicaid, and a number of others. So that's the first set at the top. And then the second set are what are called special interim committees. And these are committees that, and first of all, the joint standing committees already have their membership. So that's already in place and that's set. It's just a matter of how many days are they going to meet over the summer and fall outside of session. Then you go to the special interim committees. These are special requests made by committees, various legislative committees on different topics, and you can read through those. And what we're still waiting on, the LCC has been behind. behind the times in terms of getting all the details for this pulled together. So chairs have to be announced, and membership has to be announced, and then the chair has to work out, you know, the number of days they're allowed by the LCC to set those up. And then on the back page, the second page is other committees. And as I thought about that, I think the difference between the joint standing committees and the other committees is that the other committees only meet during the interim session, summer and fall, and they don't meet during the legislative session itself. So you'll see on the other committees, Senate Advisory Confirmations Oversight Committee, which doesn't meet during the session, but it meets off session, and then it handles, like it puts somebody on the KCC, or, you know, it puts people on a given board or office that demands Senate confirmation, and they're in place, and then they come up for a Senate confirmation vote when the Senate comes back into a session next January. The other two things I would say about this is that there's 103 days, which is a significant expansion of what we've seen of interim committees in Kansas the last few years. I know this is a nonpartisan election year for school boards and for city officials, et cetera, which, you know, but since it's a non-election year for House members, certainly for state senators every 4 years, I was a little surprised at the expansion of the number of days that. And the last thing I'll say is that within the next 2 or 3 weeks, Kansas Legislative Research Department will put out a memo that will list the committees, they'll list the membership, and they will list the purpose or the specific items that each of these given interim committees will be handling.
Grace Wilson asked, what is the, well, I lost the message. Cold case DNA, it's about a cold case committee.
DNA task force.
Do you know anything about that, Paul?
I'm sorry, repeat that again.
A cold case DNA task force.
I'm sorry, I have to pass on that. I don't have it in front of me, and I'm not sure. You know, I don't follow all the interim topics, and you know, normally there's a memo out by Legislative Research by now that usually lists all the requests and the specific items and kind of details what the committees are. And Legislative Research didn't get around to, you know, for everything else going on in Kansas, that wasn't available. So I apologize.
It's interesting that the Kansas Criminal Justice Reform Commission will have 24 days of meetings.
Yeah.
Sounds like a lot.
Seal, that might be tied to ACLU's ongoing push, not just of the legislature, but of the governor to do some of the reforms that we're long overdue for.
Okay.
That might, and I won't say exactly for sure, but I'm thinking that might also be tied to juvenile adjudication issues in Kansas, where they've been trying to figure out the best way to move juveniles out of the court system and handle them under more social service or community service options.
I think you're right, Paul, but I think it's also tied to the right to speedy trial issues that have been raised in COVID.
Got it. That would make sense with all the travails that the court system went through with the various shutdowns.
And the radical underfunding of justice services,
Juvenile
judicial,
justice, right.
general
Yeah.
judicial services, right?
Well, they've had some of the money, but it's a question of getting some of the money out the door. Actually, the governor tried to take some of the money for, when she was dealing with allotments, dealing with a crash with the COVID pandemic. But,
So, Paul, when these are all listed like this, does that mean that all the people on the committees get paid for their day? Or is that?
yes.
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 Okay.
They get paid for how many ever days that committee has been allotted then. And I'm assuming that, and I don't know the per diem well enough to know, can they still, if you come in on a Zoom call for a given committee, I'm assuming that that's also considered per diem. Maybe if you travel in, you also get mileage. I don't know all those details.
Okay. Well, that's, and that just came out yesterday, did you say, or a couple of days ago?
That list of the interim committees?
Right.
Actually, I think the document you're looking at is July 15th.
Okay.
That is correct.
And the LCC also had a Zoom call. Actually, they've got a Zoom call this Thursday, so they may start filling in more of the details about who chairpersons and committee membership will be.
Okay. Do you want to go on to the other legislative updates for housing, energy, water? We're keeping you on the spot here.
Okay, here we go. We're going to run through this fairly quickly too. So we're at least making some progress with housing. The governor selected RDG from Omaha to do our first housing needs assessment in Kansas from about 25, 30 years. It was under the Bill Graves administration that we last did some of this. Actually, RDG, for those folks in Johnson County, completed a report for Johnson County a couple months ago that's available. Some quick comments about my concerns. I worked with some folks and set up a meeting with these people to talk about the interplay between utility costs and housing affordability. And this is a housing needs assessment survey. It's not a housing affordability strategy. And I think there's real problems with that. And I'm concerned that this group out of Omaha is not much more than just kind of your general generic consulting group that moves from state to state and does kind of the same things. And I mean, we have key structural issues on housing in Kansas that we need to confront. One is that our statewide housing agency, which is called the Kansas Housing Resources Corporation, is virtually unknown to most legislators. From 1992 to 2003, it was part of the State Department of Commerce and Housing. And so it came over the legislature annually, and there was a debate about housing. 2003, it was moved to a semi-public entity. And once that happened, the legislature lost contact and any meaningful. The other couple items I'll say is that Kansas has a state housing trust fund, but we've never designated a revenue source for it. It could be the lottery, it could be casinos, it could be sales tax, it could be something, but because we don't have a housing trust fund, we can't assist low-end or lower income home buyers from down payment costs and closing costs, and helping people make that move from paying rent to owning a home. And the last thing I'll say is that, and this is more complicated than I probably want to get into now, but Kansas gets certain bonds from the federal government that have income tax breaks. They're called private activity bonds, and they could be used for first-time home buyer loans. And Kansas just has not been a player in that for really 20 years. So I could explain that later. Let me go into energy, and I'll try and move through this. We don't have a state energy plan in Kansas. We're one of 8 states in the country that doesn't have one. A bill was passed out of committee, the House Utilities Committee. It was bipartisan, Mark Schreiber and Andy Keither and other people, to draw up an energy plan for Kansas, and it was never debated on the House floor, so it's still sitting there. It might get debated in 2022. What the KCC is doing, though, finally, is they're demanding of Evergy, which is our largest private electric utility in Kansas now, to write an energy plan. It's called an integrated resource plan to talk about next steps. And the fact that Evergy is slowly but certainly getting taken over by speculative investor firms. So you have Vanguard, you have BlackRock, you have T. Rowe Price, now you have Elliott Management. Those 4 firms own about 40% of Evergy at this point. And so it's a real question, are ratepayers, the future of Kansas energy, going to be determined by what our needs are or what speculative investors want to raid Evergy, to force them to merge so they can get higher stock prices and leave Kansas. But and the last thing I'll say is the reason we really need a state energy plan is that 60–70% of our homes are heated with natural gas. And so Kansas Gas Service, which is the largest gas company, they need to be a player at this. They need to have their integrated resource plan. We need to have a comprehensive look at how many of the 1.2 million homes in Kansas are properly insulated, how many small businesses or commercial or industrial folks could benefit from energy upgrades and energy efficiency investments. I mean, all of that's been lacking in Kansas, but I think we have good news is that we have 2 out of 3 Kansas Corporation Commissioners today who can comprehend the importance of that. Should I move on to state water plant quickly?
I was just thinking about a report I saw, was it today, that during our February real cold session, it was natural gas that we were short of in the Midwest Power Pool.
Right. Yeah, wind was not the culprit, and our gas wells froze, and so we didn't. And you can people who read Kansas Reflector, somebody who's doing tremendous writing on this is a woman named Allison Kite, and there's a whole debate in Kansas versus Missouri about the extravagant costs of natural gas in February, which went up thousands of %. How are customers how is Kansas Gas going to get that money back over a period of time in Kansas versus what's going to happen to customers in Missouri? So that debate's still ongoing.
I just want to commend Allison's writing again and just say, she started in Topeka, and she's just had a short but very vertical career. I follow her closely.
Some great reporting. I wish, I've tried to, I've talked with Allison a few times, and I've tried to ask her, when are we going to dig into who actually owns Evergy? And do we care? I mean, but what
we care. You just got to tell her boss that he has to care.
Well, it.
Tell me again, who is she working for?
She
She's
works
actually
for-
on
she-
staff at the Missouri Independent, but she writes for both the Reflector and the Independent in part of the state's newsroom project.
Good, thank you.
Yeah, tremendous. Let me cover the state water plan kind of quickly here. The last finished state water plan in Kansas was 2014. So we now have, in my mind, much better people sitting who directs the Kansas Water Office, a woman named Connie Owen, and the head of the Kansas Water Authority is a woman named Dawn Bueller, who is actually a Kansas river keeper and has spent her life floating the Kansas River, understanding water issues anyway. So middle of August, they're going to come out with a new draft of what the state water plan should be going forward. So you'll have 60 to 90 days after that draft comes out. And I'll reference that. I'm going to do one more policy watch for the league and the Rural Center here towards the end of August to cover that. You'll notice on this interim committee list that we were looking at, the House Water Committee has a scheduled hearing in Garden City, August 17th through the 19th. And they, one of the topics they're going to talk about is how do we come up with a funding source for the state water plan? We're unable to find $8 million a year out of a $1 billion budget for our state water plan from the state side. So, and the last couple things I would say is listening to, the House Water Committee had some great testimonials from professors and people this session, kind of looking at the bigger picture. And one of the bigger picture problems of Kansas is that we have not had a water law forum. I don't know if that's exactly the right term, but really a serious look at water law in Kansas since 1955. And we issued just too many water rights in the 60s and 70s in Kansas. So the debate comes down to if those water rights were pumping groundwater and basically depleting the Ogallala, if those are absolutely considered property rights, then Kansas is going to have to buy back those water rights, and that will be tens of millions of dollars. And the last thing I'll say is, being a non-lawyer, trying to understand this, talking to lawyers and people, etc., the water of Kansas is owned by Kansans, and it's supposed to be used for the best public benefit. So given that the water is actually owned by the people of Kansas, if our state made serious mistakes in appropriating water rights, how best can we rectify that problem?
So I'm just going to jump in and make a quick point because it is, as you say, Paul, really obtuse. But there are two basic laws that govern water. And you're talking about appropriations law, but there's also riparian law, which does not diminish through lack of use. Appropriation of water rights can be lost through non-use. And so part of the state is very much governed under appropriation law, and other parts of the state, the eastern part mainly, is riparian. So it's complex and people have to understand it, even if they aren't lawyers, which I'm not, but I'm married to one, but he doesn't practice water law. And I would just say that this is something to watch really carefully. I've been pleased that my representative is sitting on that committee, Jerry Stogsdill, and he's extremely responsive. So anyone who wants to get into this, there are good people to talk to who are working on it. But I think it's something that the league should keep our eye on and try to think about how we can expand conversations broadly, even before we get to the point of committees and legislative work, right? It's because when it comes to gunfights in Dodge in the future, it's going to be over water.
No, I agree. I mean, it's absolutely. And this year, you know, out of general sales tax, we found $560 million of general sales tax for highways, and we can't find $8 million out of wherever we find it for a state water plan that's $20 million, you know, and the Blue Ribbon Task Force Brownback put together said it ought to be a minimum of $60 million a year on a water plan. And the other thing I would say is the Rural Center and Sierra Club and I met with Don Bueller and Connie Owen in the middle of June, and we went over a discussion about how important federal conservation programs are in Kansas, and that when you look at those, conservation reserve, conservation stewardship, EQIP, those are about $200 million a year to Kansas. So we need a coordinated strategy with how best to use federal conservation programs to integrate into the state water plan.
Paul, you just wrote your next reflector piece.
I don't think CJ was very happy with how long it took her to edit my last piece I wrote on the Farm Bill. So I don't know if I'm going to get an invite back. So.
Well, she's not there anymore. So yeah.
Oh no.
And she's working back at KCUR. So you got to deal with Sherman.
Yeah, well, I mean, it is something that I would like to write. You know, that was the presentation I put together for the water office. Was that you know, and our water authority, which has all these statutory members that are on the water authority. There's nobody from USDA, either from FSA, which handles CRP, which is retirement land, 10-year contracts, or NRCS, Natural Resources Conservation Service, that handles CSP, which is for working farms, and EQIP. Those folks need to be, we need to be working with all of them on new strategies, especially as climate change comes up and this whole market that's going to come up about carbon sequestration and, you know, paying farmers for sequestering carbon in their land. All of that's coming to play, and Kansas needs a strategy.
Well, you know, the league has been yelling for over 50 years that we better watch it because we'll run out of water. And I remember Bev Kamari out in Great Bend was head of our water study, and she into water. And you know, it seems like we're not getting anywhere. We hear about what needs to be done, but they don't seem to be doing it.
Well, Kansas, to its credit, a couple things. One, it dealt with senior water rights and junior water rights around Cheyenne Bottoms, and it really solved, you know, a lot of the flow problems at that point. Now we're in a battle over Quivira National Wildlife Refuge, that and how junior and senior water rights are going to play on the Rattlesnake Creek. You know, gosh, I mean, Quivira is a national treasure for, you know, cranes in, you know, moving across this country. So, and the last thing I'll say is, and the one thing Kansas has is probably better than most other states, is we have a much better accounting of water use. So we at least understand what, you know, the water issues. And the other thing I would say is that we're on the verge of starting to close down some coal plants in Kansas. And it looks very probable that Lawrence coal plant will shut down in 2023. And second to agriculture and water use in Kansas are power plants. Now they draw the water, they use it for steam, and they put a fair amount of it back into, the river. But water changes, water law is really up in the air at this point.
Paul, we had a question if that Kansas Legislative Research Department report spreadsheet is on the website.
Yes.
Okay.
Should be under redistricting. You mean that one copy that we had up today?
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Which website's it on? The Kansas Legislative Research?
Department, yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Are there more questions, announcements? What do you think? When do you think we might possibly meet again, Paul? Are we looking at the end of the year, or is there something in between now and December?
Well, I would be available if once we get a handle on when these redistricting legislative days are going to be. Maybe by the, I don't know, middle of October.
Okay. We can keep everybody posted. Is there anything else? What's the only thing else that you came to mind that you needed to say to us yet?
Thanks to all of you.
Yeah, thank you, Linda. It's glad that we had as many join as we did. We were up to 16 and we're down to 12. It's after 1. So we'll let everybody go. I will send out the recording link a little later after I get it. And Leslie, thank you for all your remarks. Let's see. What was that last one? If you're intrigued by waters, Paul, and even if you're not, do check out some of the material here. agriculture.kansas.gov/divisions/programs. All right. Thank you. And we will wish everybody a good afternoon